The first bullet tore through the morning air and buried itself into the juniper trunk, 6 inches from Josiah Graves's skull. The second found flesh. It ripped through his left shoulder and spun him sideways off his horse. He hit the ground hard. Dust exploded around him. His mare screamed once, then bolted into the scrubland, leaving him alone with the blood pooling beneath his shirt. 3 shadows moved on the ridge above. 3 rifles. 3 men who had been waiting for him. Josiah rolled behind a granite boulder, pressing his back against the cold stone. His breath came in short, controlled bursts. 47 years of living had taught him how to manage pain. The war had taught him how to survive. He checked his Colt single-action army. 2 rounds remained in the cylinder. 2 bullets against 3 killers. Poor odds for a man bleeding in the dirt. But Josiah Graves was not ready to die. Not today. Not until he understood why these men had come for him. He steadied his breathing, listened. The crunch of boots on loose shale, the snort of a horse. They were spreading out, flanking his position. Professional, patient. They had done this before. Josiah calculated angles. Distance to the ridge, maybe 80 yards. Too far for accurate pistol work. He would have to wait. Let them come closer. Let them think he was finished. Blood soaked through his shirt, warm and steady. He pressed his right hand against the wound, feeling the bullet still lodged somewhere beneath his collarbone. Not fatal, not immediately, but he was losing time with every heartbeat. The boots stopped moving. Silence stretched across the desert like a held breath. Then came a sound Josiah did not expect. A whisper of displaced air, a wet thud, a man's choked gasp. He risked a glance around the boulder. One of the 3 shadows had crumpled. An arrow shaft protruded from his throat, its fletching still quivering. The man pawed at it weakly, then went still. The second man spun toward the source of the attack. Before he could raise his rifle, another arrow found his horse's flank. The animal shrieked and reared. The rider tumbled backward, hitting the rocks with a sickening crack. Josiah moved. He rose from cover, ignoring the fire in his shoulder, and fired twice. Both rounds found their marks. The remaining men collapsed in the dust. The echoes faded into the morning heat. 4 bodies lay scattered across the ridge. And from the scrub brush to the west, a figure emerged. She was young, 18, maybe less. Dark hair pulled back with a leather cord, skin the color of sun-baked clay. She carried a bow made from juniper wood, and her eyes held the flat, careful watchfulness of a predator. Apache. She walked toward him without hurry, studying him the way a hawk studies a wounded rabbit, deciding whether he was worth the effort. Josiah kept his empty gun raised. Old habits. The girl stopped 10 feet away. She looked at the blood spreading across his shirt, then at the bodies scattered across the ridge. She spoke. Her English was clear, accented but precise. "You shoot well for a dying man." Josiah lowered the Colt. "Why did you help me?" She tilted her head slightly. "Because you were about to kill the men I have been hunting." She moved past him then, walking to the nearest corpse. She knelt and pulled something from the dead man's pocket, a small object that caught the morning light. When she returned, she held it out to him. A comb, ivory, delicate scroll work along the spine. Josiah's world tilted. He knew that comb. He had bought it in Santa Fe 12 years ago. He had watched his wife slide it into her hair on their wedding night. He had held it in his hands the day he buried her. "Where did you get this?" The girl watched his face. She saw the recognition, the confusion, the first tremors of something darker beneath. "From his pocket," she said, nodding toward the dead man. "They take things from the people they kill. Trophies." Josiah's hands trembled as he took the comb, his wife's comb, in the pocket of a man sent to kill him. "These men," he said slowly. "Who sent them?" "A man named Silas Crane. He owns a silver mine at Black Ridge. He is taking all the land between here and the mountains. She paused. Anyone who does not sell, he removes. Josiah stared at the comb. His mind was racing backward, 2 years into the past. Martha, his wife of 15 years, and Jacob, their 8-year-old son, both dead within a week of each other. The doctor had called it cholera. A contaminated well, he said. Tragic, but not uncommon on the frontier. Josiah had believed him. He had buried his family in the small plot behind the ranch house and spent 2 years drowning in guilt. Guilt for being away when they fell sick. Guilt for not being there when they needed him most. But now the comb sat in his palm like an accusation. How long has Crane been doing this? His voice was barely a whisper. 3 years, maybe longer. The girl's expression did not change. My family was killed 3 months ago. He sent men in the night. They burned everything, shot everyone. She said it without emotion, as if she had told the story so many times that the words no longer carried weight. Josiah understood. He recognized the emptiness in her voice. It was the same emptiness he heard in his own. What is your name? Kaya. Josiah Graves. He looked down at the comb again. And I think Silas Crane murdered my family too. The ride back to Josiah's ranch took most of the morning. Kaya had retrieved his horse from where it wandered, and she rode beside him in silence, her bow across her lap. She did not ask questions. She did not offer comfort. She simply watched the horizon and let him process what he had learned. By the time they reached the ranch house, Josiah's shoulder had gone numb. He dismounted clumsily, catching himself on the porch rail. The world swam at the edges of his vision. Kaya appeared beside him. Without a word, she guided him inside and set him in a chair by the cold fireplace. She found clean cloth and water. She cut away his blood-soaked shirt and examined the wound with practiced efficiency. The bullet is still inside, she said. It must come out. Josiah nodded. He had taken worse at Gettysburg. He gripped the arms of the chair and set his jaw. Kaya worked quickly. The pain was immense, a white-hot lance that drove through his consciousness. But he did not cry out. He had learned long ago that screaming never helped anything. When she finished, she packed the wound with herbs from a pouch at her belt and bound it tightly with strips of cloth. "You will live," she said. It was not a question. "I usually do." She sat back on her heels and studied him. "What will you do now?" Josiah looked at the comb sitting on the table beside him. Martha's comb, the last piece of her he would ever hold. "Crane has 10 men at his mine," Kaya continued. "He has bought the marshal. He has money, guns, and the law on his side. You are one man with a hole in your shoulder. I am aware of the situation. Then you know you cannot win alone." Josiah met her gaze. In the dim light of the ranch house, her eyes were dark and ancient. She had seen too much for someone her age, lost too much, and yet she was still here, still fighting. "I have a friend," he said slowly. "A man I fought beside in the war. He lives in town. If anyone would stand with me, it would be him." Kaya considered this. One friend against 10 guns. It is a start. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she rose and moved toward the door. "I will go with you," she said. "Crane's men killed my family. This fight belongs to me as much as it belongs to you." Josiah wanted to argue. She was young. She had already lost everything. She did not need to walk into another war, but he saw the set of her shoulders, the steel in her spine. She was not asking permission. She was stating fact. "We leave at first light," he said. Kaya nodded once. Then she stepped outside to keep watch through the night. The town of Copper Bend sat in a shallow valley, surrounded by hills the color of dried blood. It was not much to look at. A single main street lined with weather-beaten buildings, a saloon, a general store, a blacksmith shop with smoke curling from its chimney. Josiah rode in with Kaya beside him. She had pulled a poncho over her shoulders and tucked her hair beneath a wide-brimmed hat. From a distance, she might pass for a young Mexican laborer. Up close, the disguise would not hold. They did not plan to be here long. The blacksmith shop stood at the end of the street. Josiah dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. Through the open door, he could see the orange glow of the forge and hear the rhythmic clang of hammer on steel. He stepped inside. The man at the anvil was past 50, with arms like oak branches and a face carved from granite. His gray hair was pulled back, and an old scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from Pickett's charge, where he had stood beside Josiah and watched the world burn. Ezra Hardin, two-shot they had called him in the war, because he rarely needed more than 2 rounds to finish a fight. Ezra looked up from his work. His hammer paused mid-swing. "Josiah Graves." A slow smile crossed his weathered face. "Thought you were dead." "Not yet." Josiah stepped closer. "But there are people working on it." The smile faded. Ezra set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his leather apron. He studied Josiah's bandaged shoulder, the grim set of his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes. "Tell me," Ezra said. So Josiah told him about the ambush, about Kaya, about the comb he had found in a dead man's pocket, and about Martha and Jacob. When he finished, Ezra stood motionless. His hands, which had been steady through 100 battles, trembled slightly at his sides. Ezra had known Martha well. He had been there when Josiah married her, standing as witness in the small church outside Santa Fe. He had carved a wooden horse for Jacob's 5th birthday, spending 3 weeks on the details because he wanted it to be perfect. He had been the one to help Josiah dig the graves when the sickness took them both. Now he learned that it was not sickness at all. "Arsenic," Josiah said quietly. "That is what Crane used. Poison in the well. Made it look like cholera." Ezra closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something hard and ancient had settled into his gaze. The look of a man who had put away his weapons and found a reason to pick them up again. "Where is this Crane?" "Black Ridge, 3 days' ride. He has a silver mine there and 10 men guarding it." Ezra walked to a cabinet beneath his workbench. He knelt and pulled out a long wooden case covered in dust. Inside lay a Sharps Model 1874, the same rifle he had carried through the war. He had not touched it in over a decade. He lifted it carefully, checking the action, sighting down the barrel. "When do we leave?" They found the informant in the saloon that night. His name was Emmett Finch, and he owed Ezra money from a poker game 6 months past. He was a small man with nervous hands and a face that always seemed to be sweating. He worked for Crane, running supplies between the mine and town. Josiah and Ezra cornered him in the alley behind the saloon. It did not take long to make him talk. "The mine," Emmett stammered, pressed against the wall with Josiah's knife at his throat. 10 men there, always armed. Crane does not trust anyone." "The marshal?" Ezra growled. "Bought and paid for. Has been for 2 years. Tell me about the poisoning." Emmett's face went pale. "I do not know anything about—" Josiah pressed the blade closer. A thin line of red appeared on Emmett's neck. "The well," Emmett gasped. "At the Graves Ranch. Crane ordered it. Arsenic in the water. He said it had to look natural. Said the woman and the boy were in the way of his expansion." Josiah's vision went red. His hand trembled with the urge to push the knife deeper, to end this miserable creature who had been part of his family's murder. Ezra's hand closed on his shoulder. "Not yet," the old soldier murmured. "He can still be useful." Josiah held himself still for a long, terrible moment. Then he stepped back. They bound Emmett with rope and locked him in Ezra's storage shed. Kaya volunteered to stand watch while they planned. That night, the 3 of them gathered in the blacksmith shop. Kaya would scout ahead at dawn, using the terrain to stay hidden. She would signal with a mirror flash when she had mapped the mine's defenses. Ezra would take the Sharps to a high position overlooking the camp. He could drop a man at 400 yards with that rifle, maybe farther if the wind cooperated. Josiah would lead Emmett into the mine under the pretense of prisoner exchange. Once inside, once he had located Crane, the killing would begin. "It is a thin plan," Ezra said. "It is the only plan we have." They prepared to leave before dawn. Kaya went to check on Emmett one final time before they departed. She found the storage shed door hanging open. The ropes lay cut on the ground, severed by a piece of jagged metal Emmett had pried from a broken hinge. "He is gone," she reported, her voice flat with controlled anger. Josiah felt cold dread settle into his stomach. Emmett knew everything now. Their faces, their numbers, their intentions. By sunrise, he would reach Black Ridge and spill it all to Crane. "We have lost the element of surprise," Ezra said. "We have lost more than that." Josiah stared at the empty shed. "Crane will double his guards. He will be waiting for us." "Then what do we do?" Josiah turned to face them. Ezra, gray and grim and ready. Kaya, young and fierce, and burning with the same fire that consumed him. "We go anyway," he said. "If we wait, Crane will send men to finish what he started. Better to take the fight to him than wait for it to come to us." They rode out within the hour. That evening, Josiah returned to his ranch alone to retrieve more ammunition. He kept a hidden cache beneath the floorboards, enough rounds to see them through a prolonged firefight. He never made it inside. 3 men waited in the shadows of his barn. He saw them too late, heard the click of hammers being cocked. He dove for cover as gunfire split the night. When the shooting stopped, the men were gone. They had not come to kill him. They had come to deliver a message. Josiah found it nailed to his front door. A leather apron stained with blood. Ezra's apron, and pinned to it, a severed finger wearing a silver ring. The ring Ezra had worn since his wife passed 10 years ago. His wedding band. The note beneath was written in a careful hand. "Graves. Bring the land deed to Black Ridge. You have 48 hours, or your friend dies one piece at a time." Crane Josiah stood in the darkness, holding his friend's finger in his palm. The rage that filled him was cold and absolute. It did not burn like fire. It froze like the dead of winter. Kaya emerged from the shadows where she had been keeping watch. She saw the apron, the finger, the note. "They have your friend," she said. "Yes." 48 hours. "Yes." She met his eyes. "What will you do?" Josiah tucked the note into his pocket. His voice came out flat and empty, like wind blowing through an abandoned house. "Walk into that camp. Kill every man standing between me and Silas Crane. Bring Ezra home." "That is not a plan. That is suicide." "Maybe." He checked his Colt, then reached into his boot and withdrew a small Remington Derringer. 2 shots, a weapon of last resort. He tucked it back into place. "But I am out of better ideas." The sun rose over Black Ridge like a bloody coin. Below, Silas Crane's mining camp sprawled across the valley floor. Wooden buildings, canvas tents, a large central structure that served as Crane's headquarters, and everywhere, men with rifles patrolling the perimeter. Josiah counted them from the ridge. 10, just as Emmett had said, all armed, all watching. Kaya crouched beside him, invisible in the scrub brush. Her bow lay across her knees, an arrow already nocked. "The tall building in the center," she murmured. "That is where they will keep your friend." Josiah nodded. He had already mapped the layout in his mind. Entry points, cover positions, kill zones, the mathematics of violence. He was about to speak when hoofbeats sounded behind them. Both turned, weapons raised. A rider emerged from the tree line. A man wearing a marshal's star, Hollis Tate. He stopped his horse 20 feet away and raised both hands, palms open. "Easy, Graves. I am not here to arrest you." Josiah kept his gun trained on the lawman's chest. "Then why are you here?" Tate dismounted slowly. He was in his early 50s, with a weathered face and tired eyes. The eyes of a man who had made too many compromises and was finally sick of living with himself. "Emmett Finch came to see me yesterday. drunk, bragging about how Crane would reward him. Tate's jaw tightened. He told me about the poisoning, your wife, your boy, the arsenic in the well. You knew about the other killings, the land grabs. I suspected. I looked the other way. Tate reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a folded paper. But I did not sign up to help murder women and children. That is a line I will not cross. He held out the paper, a detailed map of the mining camp, guard positions, patrol schedules, Crane's personal quarters marked with an X. I drew this from memory, Tate said. I have been to that camp a dozen times, collecting my payments. I know every inch of it. Josiah stared at the map, at the lawman who had finally found his conscience. Why should I trust you? You should not. Tate met his gaze without flinching. But you need every advantage you can get, and I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror again. A long moment passed. Josiah took the map. What will you do? He asked. I will block the southern road with my deputies. If you win, Crane will not escape that way. If you lose, Tate shrugged. Then I suppose none of this matters anyway. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Josiah entered the camp alone. He rode slowly down the main approach, hands visible, a white handkerchief tied to his saddle horn, the universal sign of parley. It was a lie, but it got him past the outer guards. Armed men converged from all directions. They surrounded him with rifles raised, hard faces, and harder eyes. He let them take his horse, let them pat him down and remove his colt, let them march him toward the central building. They did not check his boots. The derringer stayed hidden against his ankle. The door to the headquarters opened. Silas Crane stepped out. He was tall and lean, with black hair going gray at the temples and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were the pale blue of winter ice, and they held no warmth whatsoever. He wore a fine wool coat despite the heat, and a pearl-handled revolver hung at his hip. Behind him, two men dragged Ezra Hardin into the light. Josiah's heart clenched. His friend looked bad, face swollen and purple with bruises, blood crusted on his split lip, left hand wrapped in bloody bandages where a finger used to be. But Ezra's eyes were clear, alert, waiting. Josiah Graves. Crane's voice was cultured, almost pleasant, like a banker discussing interest rates. I was beginning to think you would not come. I am here. Let him go. Crane smiled. It did not reach his eyes. The deed to your land first. Then we can discuss your friend's future. Josiah reached slowly into his coat. His fingers brushed the folded paper hidden there. Then he looked past Crane, toward the eastern ridge. A flash of light, brief as a heartbeat, mirror glass catching the morning sun. Kaya's signal. She was in position. Josiah let himself smile. I do not have a deed, he said. Only this. His hand came out of his coat empty. In the same motion, he dropped to one knee and drew the derringer from his boot. The first shot took the guard on his left through the throat. The second caught the man on his right square in the chest. Then the world exploded. Kaya's arrow took the guard in the watchtower before he could sound an alarm. He toppled from his perch without a sound. Josiah rolled behind a water trough as bullets chewed the ground where he had been kneeling. He snatched a fallen rifle and returned fire. Ezra did not hesitate. Despite his injuries, despite the pain, he lunged at his nearest captor. His forehead connected with the man's nose in a spray of blood. He seized the falling rifle and fired twice from the hip. 3 more guards went down in the crossfire. The remaining men scattered, seeking cover behind wagons and barrel stacks. The crack of gunfire echoed off the valley walls. Bullets splintered wood and kicked up fountains of dust. From the ridge, Kaya moved like a ghost. Each arrow found its mark. One man down, then another. Silent death raining from above. Josiah advanced through the chaos. He had learned to kill in the slaughterhouse of the Civil War, where death came so fast there was no time to think, only to act, only to survive. He moved from cover to cover, fired, moved again. Bodies fell in his wake. Within 3 minutes, 8 of Crane's men lay dead or dying. But Crane himself had vanished. Josiah saw him disappear into the mine entrance, a shotgun clutched in his hands. "Finish out here," he called to Ezra. Then he followed Crane into the darkness. The mine shaft swallowed the light within 20 feet. Josiah moved carefully through the gloom, rifle raised, ears straining for any sound. Timber supports lined the walls. The air smelled of dust and blasting powder and ancient stone. A shotgun roared in the darkness ahead. Josiah threw himself against the tunnel wall. Buckshot tore through the space where his head had been, peppering the timbers with holes. He fired back. Once, twice. Muzzle flash illuminating the tunnel in brief orange bursts. A grunt of pain echoed through the shaft. He pressed forward, moving low and fast. He found Crane 30 yards deeper, slumped against the tunnel wall. The mine owner's right leg was soaked with blood, where a rifle round had torn through his thigh. He still held the shotgun, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim. Josiah kicked the weapon away. Crane looked up at him. Even now, even bleeding in the dirt, those pale eyes held nothing but contempt. "You cannot prove anything," he rasped. "I have friends in the territorial government. Important friends. They will what?" Josiah crouched before him. "They are not here. It is just you and me, and the ghosts of everyone you murdered." "You are making a mistake. I can make you rich. The mine is worth—" "Did my wife beg?" Crane stopped talking. "When the arsenic started working," Josiah continued, his voice flat and terrible. "When she realized what was happening to her, to our son, did she beg for mercy? I was not there. I only gave the order. Did she beg?" Silence. "I thought not." Josiah raised the rifle. Then he heard it. A boot scrape on stone behind him. He spun, but too late. One of Crane's men stood at the tunnel entrance, revolver aimed at Josiah's chest. The man must have circled around, come in through another shaft. His finger tightened on the trigger. Josiah had no time to raise his weapon, no time to dodge. He braced for the impact. The gunman jerked. His eyes went wide. He looked down at the arrow shaft protruding from his chest, then crumpled face first into the dirt. Kaya stood behind him, bow still raised. Blood spattered her face, and her chest heaved from running. But her aim had been true. She met Josiah's eyes. A single nod passed between them. Acknowledgement. Respect. The bond of warriors who had saved each other's lives. Then she turned and walked back toward the light, leaving him alone with Crane. Josiah faced the man who had taken everything from him. "Please." Crane's voice had gone thin and reedy. The arrogance was gone, replaced by animal fear. "I have money. I can—" "You cannot buy your way out of this. There is no deal. There is no negotiation. There is only what you owe." "Wait! Wait!" Josiah did not wait. The shot echoed through the mine shaft like thunder. Then silence. When Josiah emerged into the sunlight, the fighting was over. 8 of Crane's men lay dead. The remaining 2 knelt in the dust with their hands behind their heads, guarded by Marshal Tate and 2 deputies who had arrived from the southern road. Ezra sat against a wagon wheel, pressing a bloody rag to a fresh wound in his shoulder. He looked up as Josiah approached. "Well, it is finished." Ezra nodded slowly, his eyes closed, and he let his head fall back against the wagon. "Good." Josiah sat down beside him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. They just breathed. Let the adrenaline fade. Let the weight of what they had done settle over them. "I thought I lost you," Josiah said quietly. Ezra opened one eye. "Takes more than a mining baron and 10 hired guns to put me down. You should know that by now." "I should." Josiah looked at his friend's bandaged hand. "How bad?" "Lost the finger. Still have 9 left. Enough to swing a hammer. Ezra paused. Enough to hold a rifle if you ever need me again. Let us hope I do not. Let us hope. They sat together in the dust and the blood and the fading gun smoke while the sun climbed higher over Black Ridge. 3 days later, Josiah stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains. His shoulder was healing. The nightmares had not stopped, but they were quieter now, less urgent. Behind him, the door opened. Kaya stepped out, her saddlebags over her shoulder, her bow across her back. You are leaving? She nodded. There are survivors from my tribe. They fled north after the attack. I need to find them. Josiah turned to face her. In the golden light of sunset, she looked impossibly young and impossibly ancient. She had walked through fire and come out the other side, forged into something harder than steel. You saved my life, he said, twice. You helped me avenge my family. The debt is balanced. He wanted to argue, to offer her a home, a place to rest, a life that did not involve running and fighting and bleeding. But he saw the determination in her stance. She had her own path to walk, and it led away from here. If you ever need anything, he said, this place will be here. You will always have a home. Kaya studied him for a long moment. Something flickered in her dark eyes. Not warmth exactly, but recognition, respect. She walked to the fence post at the edge of the yard. From her quiver, she withdrew a single arrow and drove it deep into the wood. Among my people, she said, this marks a bond of honor. It means we are bound as warriors, not by blood, not by love, but by something stronger. Shared purpose, shared loss, shared survival. She looked back at him. If you call, I will come. Josiah felt something shift in his chest. The weight he had carried for 2 years did not disappear. It never would. But it felt lighter somehow, easier to bear. And if you ever need me, he said, I will answer. Kaya mounted her horse. For just a moment, she paused at the edge of the yard, silhouetted against the setting sun. Then she rode north without looking back. Josiah watched until she disappeared over the ridge. The arrow in the fence post caught the last rays of daylight, its fletching trembling in the evening breeze. An hour later, Ezra limped up the porch steps, his arm in a sling, his face still mottled with fading bruises. She is gone. Yes. Think we will see her again? Josiah looked at the arrow, at the mountains turning purple in the twilight, at the land he had nearly lost. Someday, when the time is right. Ezra settled into the chair beside him with a grunt of pain. They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge. So what now? Ezra asked. Josiah thought about the question. For 2 years he had lived in the shadow of grief and guilt. For 2 years he had been waiting to die without realizing it. That was over now. Rebuild, he said. Fix what is broken. Keep living. Sounds like a plan. Only one I have. 1 month later, a rider came to the ranch. He carried a letter sealed with red wax. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a wanted poster. Josiah's own face stared back at him from the page. Beneath it, bold letters declared, wanted for murder. Reward $500, dead or alive. The signature at the bottom belonged to the territorial governor, Silas Crane's brother-in-law. Josiah read the poster twice. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. Ezra's voice drifted from the barn where he was shoeing a horse. What is it? Josiah walked inside the house. He took his gun belt from its peg on the wall and strapped it around his waist. He checked his Colt, cylinder full, action smooth, and slid it into the holster. He retrieved the Sharps rifle from above the fireplace, loaded it, set it by the door. Then he stepped back onto the porch and looked out at the land that had cost him everything, the land that had almost killed him, the land he would die to protect. They are coming for me, he said. Ezra appeared at the corner of the barn. His eyes narrowed. How many? Does it matter? The old soldier considered this. Then he walked to the porch, reached past Josiah, and took the Sharp's rifle in his good hand. No, Ezra said. I suppose it does not. They stood together, watching the horizon, waiting for whatever came next. The arrow in the fence post trembled in the wind but held fast. The war was not over, it was only beginning.